Mixing with my mixing tip, compressing vocals with an 1176 compressor. Maybe this should be better phrased, mixing with 1176 compressors, because you have different options, and that's kind of part of what I wanted to talk about here. The 1176 is a FET compressor, stands for Field Effect Transistor, and it was created by Bill Putnam, the founder of Universal Audio, and it was a very unique one in that it was a very powerful type of compressor, variable attack and release times, and a very, very fast attack. Like the actual attack time is 20 microseconds at its fastest, which is insanely fast. So primarily what we're dealing with is transistors, using transistor technology, a pure solid state component here. Has transformers on the inputs and outputs, and a gain staging that allows you to sort of overdrive those components. So usually when you get into vintage components of any kind, they will create some form of a tonal coloration, and that's kind of part of what you want. And there are many techniques and ways of working with the 1176. So I just want to kind of show you a few techniques. And maybe this example is not the perfect musically for all of the things, but you'll be able to hear the effects that I'm talking about and kind of work with them. Now, in the Universal Audio collection, what I really like here that's kind of cool, and let me, sorry for not centering this up a little bit better. What we have here is 3 versions of the 1176. In the initial one, we have the Revision A, which is the first one, or what is often called the Silverface version. And this was the original version created by Bill Putnam, and a little bit noisy, got a little bit of an edge to it, and the release characteristic, which is sort of unique to it, has got like a multi-stage release. It's like a 2-stage release, and you see this with a lot of limiters, where like an LA2A or a Fairchild or the 2254, where you'll have an initial fast release after the attack kind of pops in, and then you have a slower, longer total release curve. Now, the release time on the 1176 by design gives you a range of 50 milliseconds up to 1.1 seconds. What's interesting about the 1176 is a few things. One is there's sort of a fixed threshold. So as you adjust the input gain, you're passing through a threshold, determining how much signal is passing through the threshold. But you're also setting a distortion ratio, because the more you drive that input, the more you go into distortion. What's really unique about this is that I'm not sure that the potentiometers that they use for this input gain stage were all that consistent, because if you went from one unit to the next and you matched the exact same numbers, you would get completely different gain structures. They don't all match up that way, and so you always have to use your ear when adjusting them. Now, obviously, when you get through the different versions here, if you match up the numbers of the Silverface or the Revision E, which is the blackface version, this is a low noise version. We'll get into that into a second. You'll get a different characteristic sound, a different harmonic distortion sound, and the gain will be different. So the numbers don't necessarily match up from unit to unit. The bottom one is actually a modified one. It has a few additional features, which we'll kind of touch up or get into. Now, there are 4 ratio buttons, and a 5th option that allows you to, you can actually enable all of the ratios, and you can actually take them all out as well. And therefore, you can just run this as a pure harmonic distortion engine, kind of crank in, drive it a little bit, go through the transformers without actually applying any form of compression whatsoever. Now, let's start with just like a simple thing. Why would you select one of these over the other? So we have the Silverface, we have the LN version, which is the low noise version. So this was one that was adapted to later. Some of the complaints about the other one was the noise. So this is actually going to give you a warmer, richer sound. They changed the release characteristic, or the multi-stage release characteristic, so that that program-dependent release is a little bit smoother sounding. So you'll get, with the Silverface, more aggressive and an edgier sound. You get a bit of a warmer characteristic here with the blackface, and then this one is the blackface basically with some additional features, including a 10 millisecond attack time, which doesn't exist anywhere. It was a modified anniversary edition that they put out with some people put some modifications in it. It also has a 2-to-1 ratio, where none of them ever had the 2-to-1 ratio. So the way that let's start and just kind of go through what some of the different settings might be. So we'll start just by soloing up a vocal. Now with this particular vocal, and this is important, if you watched one of the previous videos here, I'm just going to hide the windows for a second. There was a process that I went through, which was a gain staging of the vocal. So this was on a previous mix tip from the last episode, and we went through the vocal, at least a section of it here, and with this section we went through, just ran a gain staging so with the VU meter so that we could balance it out. And the idea of that is very important, because when you come back here and then we open up our compressors here, we're going to get some even kind of processing here. One of the things that can happen is if you don't even out that processing prior to coming into something like this, especially if you start doing radical things, you'll get very inconsistent results. Well, some things will just get sucked the life out of, and other things won't be compressed at all. And you want this to kind of work evenly so that whatever characteristic you get out of it, that's really, what you're going to be going for. So with the attack and release, this is the slow setting 1 and the fast setting is 7. The attack time is always under a millisecond, 800 microseconds or 0.8 milliseconds on the slow side. But there is, but you hear the difference in that sweep. So as you kind of move that from fast to slow, you do get an interesting kind of characteristic. So when you have fast attack and fast release, because it's so fast, you can get a distortion that you can kind of build into it. So I want to show you more of a natural approach here first, and then let's talk a little bit about how you can kind of work with this a little bit. So we'll start with a silver face. The other guys are bypassed.
Yeah. Slow down, baby. Take a moment and breathe. I can't hear what you're saying. Stop for a minute. Come sit there with me. I can see you're afraid, and I don't know what to tell you. You're scared I might fail you.
So you see how we're getting some pretty consistent gain reduction, and that's why that gain staging prior to it is kind of cool. So this is more of like a smoothing form of compression. So relatively, slower on the slower side attack, and slowing down the release as well. So it's a little bit more of an averaging type of thing. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a similar type of setup here on the black face here, so you could just get an idea of what the differences are between the two.
Yeah. Slow down, baby. Take a moment and breathe. I can't hear what you're saying. Stop for a minute. Come sit there with me. I can see you're afraid, and I don't know what to tell you.
Okay, so there you kind of have like that, and that's part of the sound of the 1176. It can have a very smooth, if not aggressive type of characteristics. Listen to the black face here.
Yeah. Slow down, baby. Take a moment and breathe. I can't hear what you're saying. Stop for a minute. Come sit there with me. I can see you're afraid, and I don't know what to tell you. You're scared I might fail you, and so you're leaving here before it goes wrong.
So what you get there is a little bit of a warmer kind of sound versus the silver face.
Yeah. Slow down, baby. Take a moment and breathe. I can't hear what you're saying. Stop for a minute. Come sit there with me. I can see you're afraid, and I don't know what to tell you. You're scared I might fail you, and so you're leaving here before it goes wrong.
So there you can see how there's this difference in terms of the way that they react, and there's a slight difference. There's a little more movement that you'll notice on the silver face than you see on the black face, even though they have similar release times, and you can kind of adjust to those things. But the general program-dependent release characteristic is different, a little more radical in the silver face. That makes it more appropriate for like really heavy compression and room sounds and stuff like that. It's like a more hyperactive kind of thing, which is kind of cool. And so let's go, if we notch it up here a little bit, I'm just going to go through some of the ratios just so you can kind of see how that starts to change the tonal character.
Yeah. Slow down, baby, take a moment and breathe. I can't hear what you're saying. Stop for a minute, come sit there with me. I can see you're afraid, and I don't know what to tell you. You're scared I might fail you, and so you're leaving here before it goes wrong. Don't you know you can't keep running from where you belong again? Oh yeah. And I'll find you again.
So you can see how like the heavier compression ratio brings out more of brings out a little bit more of the proximity effect of the vocal, which if you were trying to warm up the vocal, that might be kind of a cool thing. Here, let's hear it on this guy right here.
Slow down, baby, take a moment and breathe. I can't hear what you're saying.
So like that sounds really nice.
Stop for a minute, come sit there with me. I can see you're afraid, and I don't know what to tell you. You're scared I might fail you, and so you're leaving.
Now what you'll notice is the amount of gain reduction doesn't change significantly, even though you kind of flip through the ratio. And this is something that is sort of part of the design. You would think that if you go from 4-to-1 to 20-to-1, that you would be getting basically 5 times the amount of gain reduction, technically. But it doesn't necessarily kind of play out that way. But you could see how when you're working with it, you have to really pay attention to what it is that you're doing. So just with these basic settings, we can have some pretty, radical different tonal characters that are adding, where you're bringing in more body, more openness by working with the ratio in addition to working with some of the basic settings. And this is essentially how you use any kind of vintage processor, whatever the parameters are. But let's go to something that is like, like another example, like a little bit more obvious. Now, when you hit all of the buttons in, and you could hit any configuration or variation of these where you have, groupings or sets of them in at any given point, you get a different, what it does is it does a shift on the bias current that determines the gain reduction. So the meter pins, this is exactly what happens on the original, and you get something that's much more of a hyperactive kind of gain reduction. And I'm not sure if this was accidental and then it just sort of worked, but whatever it is, it's really, really cool. Sometimes what's done here is you could do this one of a couple ways. One is to do a very fast attack and release, and you get a little bit more of a distortion with the pumping and breathing.
Yeah. Slow down, baby, take a moment and breathe. I can't hear what you're saying. Stop for a minute, come sit there with me. I can see you're afraid, and I don't know what to tell you.
And if we slow down the attack,
scared I might fail you, and so you're leaving here before it goes wrong.
You can smooth out a little bit of that distortion characteristic from the fast attack.
Yeah. Slow down, baby, take a moment and breathe. I can't hear what you're saying. Stop for a minute, come sit there with me. I can see you're afraid, and I don't know what to tell you. You're scared I might fail you.
And so what is like an automated way of bringing out all the breaths, and what you'll notice with the voice is that it'll pull it really forward or up front and make it very present. So when you have this sort of voice that you want this really dry, like very, very upfront kind of sound, almost like the person is breathing on you, then that is, this is the classic effect. Now, if you want something a little bit warmer here, you can also do it here with the blackface, and it has a similar effect here. So almost always do it with a very fast release.
Yeah. Slow down, baby, take a moment and breathe. I can't hear what you're saying. Stop for a minute, come sit there with me. I can see you're afraid, and I don't know what to tell you. You're scared I might fail you, and so you're leaving here before it goes wrong.
Let's switch over to the silver
Don't
face.
you know you can't keep running from where you belong again? Oh yeah, and I'll find you again.
In this case, this one sounds a little bit more intimate and upfront. This one brings out a little bit more of the breathiness and the air kind of in between. And that's kind of it's like an interesting way of kind of approaching it. It's so there are many variations in between, and I kind of just showed you like two basic kind of setups in terms of the way that you work and the way that you adjust and set up the tonal characteristic. And those are just like some really basic techniques if you're looking for that type of sound. There's also an interesting thing here, which has the with the anniversary edition, where they have a 10 millisecond attack time, and this can give you a little bit more of an aggressive kind of feel at a lighter ratio.
Yeah.
Because you can get more of that.
Slow down, baby, take a moment and breathe. I can't hear what you're saying. Stop for a minute, come sit there with me. I can see you're afraid, and I don't know what to tell you. You're scared I might fail you.
And so what you get there is with that slow attack, or that 10 millisecond attack, is really cool because it allows the transient to a little bit more fully and in a warm way kind of pop through. That makes the vocal kind of cut and pull forward a little bit more. And then you can kind of step up the ratio to get a different balance with the tone.
Slow down, baby, take a moment and breathe. I can't hear what you're saying. Stop for a minute, come sit there with me. I can see you're afraid, and I don't know what to tell you. You're scared I might fail you, and so you're leaving here before it goes wrong.
And so the cool idea about this and working with the 1176, and this is something I've never worked on in hardware version, but I've worked on the other two very much so in hardware version. Although it's not necessarily, I wouldn't call it necessarily like the go-to vocal compressor, it definitely has a unique character and a sound. And you could see here, just in terms of deciding which one you want to use, which flavor you want to use, and what kind of vibe you're going after, there's a lot of control here with those variable attack and release times. And that was something that was really unique about this when this was originally made. Well, the first one came out in 1967, and in the 70s, the low noise version came out. But very, very cool, very powerful plug-in collection, and the universal audio emulations are amazing. It always helps when you own the company that manufactures the hardware, and the founder of your company is the one who actually created it. So you have all the specs, and you have everything, and you can map everything out to the most pristine, perfect unit ever built, and which I'm sure he kept in his collection. But there you have it. Our mix tip of the week, which is mixing or compressing vocals with an 1176 compressor.